Terrific. Team, I think we're past 10, so I'll hand over to Jessica and we'll kick off, shall we, Jessica?
Hi, yes, good morning, everyone, and welcome to our October Safety Update webinar. I'll be your host today. My name is Jessica Kirigo with updates from Andrea and Gary as well. So for today, Andrea will look at our upcoming safety events and most in particular, the new Victoria dangerous goods regulations. And Gary will look at the difference between the e-bike and e-scooter and some other legislative changes and our upcoming safety and strategic safety planning workshop. So please stay tuned with us, and I'll push it off on to Andrea.
Thank you, Jessica. Now, I did, being October, I thought we couldn't not mention that October is Safe Work Month or Safety Month in Australia. So this is just a reminder to, if you haven't already done any safety events at your workplace, any safety promotions this month, it's a good opportunity to do so. And if you look on the safety website, so Safe Work Australia website for national, and also each state's WorkSafe website, there's lots of tools, and promotional material, posters, all this kind of stuff that you can download and use. There's also certainly in Victoria, WorkSafe has lots of good free safety events. So it's a good opportunity to, take advantage of those, whether you're a safety manager or whether you want to use those materials to promote safety in the workplace. So I encourage you to get on board and host some sort of safety events this month. Now, this month is also Ride to Work Day next Wednesday. So again, it's part of, your safety and health promotion. It's another one to get involved with if it's possible to, encourage your workers to ride to work. And, I'd encourage you to make sure you have a safe place for them to, park their bicycles and put their riding gear if you are able to participate in that one with your team.
And Andrea, if
yes.
It keeps raining, they might need to paddle their boat to work as well.
Yes, indeed. So it might be swim to work day today for some. Now, it's also the Thunderstorm Asthma season has started in Victoria. Sorry, I'm not sure about the other states. A couple of years ago, we had a very severe, thunderstorm asthma season. So for workplaces, it's certainly worth communicating this information to all of your staff, talking to your first aiders as well, and understanding that whether they've been trained to treat allergies and asthma occurrences. And it's also and remind your staff, that whether it's good to inform your first aiders of who your staff are that have allergies and asthma. And just a couple of years ago in Victoria, we were prompted to check our first aid kits, and the information that was previously provided about not putting any medications in first aid kits has changed. And so one of the recommended inclusions in a first aid kit is now to consider providing asthma medication such as a Ventolin inhaler in your first aid kit. So that's something you can look at, and you can purchase those without prescription from the chemist. So have a look at that. The EpiPen is another item that you might consider including in your first aid kit. But again, it's just worth talking to your staff and understanding who could be vulnerable, and communicating information, and subscribe to the Vic Emergency app. That app will actually send out alerts when there is a risk of the thunderstorm asthma. So I encourage you to check that one out. Something else new this month is the dangerous goods regulations in Victoria. The new regulations have been released. So every 10 years, the old regulations expire, and the Safety Authority are required to review and update these regulations if needed. So the new dangerous goods regulations commence on the 26th of November. That's just the same date that the old ones expire. I have read these new regulations, and there's actually virtually no change. So it's word for word, almost identical to the old regulations, the 2012 dangerous goods regulations. However, there's just a couple of minor changes that I'll tell you about. So firstly, I believe it's for about 20 years, there's been a provision in the regulations that allowed you to continue to display old placards that were compliant under previous regulations. So the main difference was, I believe it was about 20 years ago, they changed the regulations and said the diamond on the placard for packaged dangerous goods, it used to be a 50 millimeter diamond, so quite a small one, and you were allowed to keep those. They changed the regulations and required a 100 mil diamond on those placards. They've now removed the provision to allow the old ones to be kept. So what that means is if your workplace still has the small diamond on your placards for packaged dangerous goods, you will now need to replace them with the new 100 millimeter size. Keep in mind, though, the regulations have always said that the diamonds needed to be maintained clean and clear. So it's unlikely that your old ones would have still been in good visible condition. So, it's probably just a good opportunity to have a look at all your dangerous goods placards on your site, check that they still apply, and check that they're clean and not faded and not peeling off and still in good condition.
So, Andrea, just there, it's probably opportune for everyone to think about an annual safety sign survey. A lot of best practice companies walk around and check not only their dangerous goods signage, although that's critically important, but also your general safety signs, speed limit signs on site, other important signage, particularly if it's outdoors. I think, as you said, Andrea, it's going to fade over a number of years. So we always recommend annual safety sign survey, have maybe a safety committee or safety reps, good activity, to walk around the site, record the signage that might need an update. Sorry to interrupt you there, Andrew.
No, thanks, Gary. That's a good point. And, I would always check those in your regular safety inspections. If a sign is faded, it's no longer compliant, so you need to replace that. A good one to check is, the HAZChem sign. I noticed that the red paints on the signs do tend to fade quicker than the others. So the red, HAZChem sign, if you're required to have those, do fade, and you need to keep those up to date. The other change in the dangerous goods regulations is that these are amendments that actually came in place last year, but they've now been built into the new regulations. So this is the requirement to send a dangerous goods notification of your quantities to WorkSafe. It was previously a 5-yearly renewal on this. They've moved this renewal to 2 yearly. So if there's no changes, you have to continue to update WorkSafe every 2 years. This is now via an online portal, so it's quite easy to do. They've now specified, so it used to just be a rule of thumb that if your quantities changed, you would tell WorkSafe. They've now made it specific that if your quantities increase or decrease, so this is of any of your dangerous goods that are above manifest quantity that you had to tell WorkSafe about. If the quantities go up or down by 20% or more, you now have the specific obligation to update your notification via the online portal. Now, when you submit this notification, you receive back an email with an acknowledgement from WorkSafe. You are now required to display a copy of that acknowledgement at the workplace. There's no details about where that needs to be. So, at a front office or security gate or something is a good place to display that. So that's the key changes. I'll now hand you over to Gary to tell you about the scooters and the e-bikes.
Thanks very much, Andrea, and thanks, Jessica, earlier. Folks, in our current newsletter, if you've seen that, you may have seen an article on e-bikes versus e-scooters. I find this interesting because if anything like you must have seen somebody dart past you, either out in the suburbs or in the city area, on scooters. And they come out of nowhere, they're very quiet, and some of them seem quite fast. And I guess the first thing I can tell you, if it's a scooter, it's almost certainly illegal. So whatever you saw, the person, the rider, is operating illegally. And I ride a bicycle, a push bike, most days when it's not raining and I have the time. And occasionally people, particularly uphill, pass me and they're pedaling away and they're doing quite nice. And I look increasingly there. Oh, yes, I am getting older, so I'm getting slower. But the ones that pass me quickly and more often, if I look closely, they're e-bikes. So I thought you might be interested in this growing concept. You appreciate everything electric, electric cars, electric everything is just the top of mind everywhere these days. I think these things have a lot of great application and are going to be terrific. But I want to separate the two out for you. So let's have a look. So what I can share with you is that for some reason, e-scooters are over-regulated. That's Gary Rowe's statement, over-regulated by comparison to e-bikes. So if you look at it from a risk perspective, somebody has established that e-scooters are deadly. And we know someone was killed in Melbourne, I think, in the last week or so. So I know this can happen. But it also happens with bicyclists each year as well. So let's have a look. I'm not saying it's wrong, but just simply this is what the situation is. So let's take you through the key features. So what is an e-bike? An e-bike is a bicycle that has an auxiliary motor that doesn't exceed 200 watts. You may not know that, but the little manual for the bike will tell you this. But you can go up to 250 watts if the motor cuts out when the bike gets above 25 kilometres per hour. And that's pretty brisk. If you ride a bicycle and you're going above 25 kilometres per hour, you're doing fairly nicely. Cars are going past you, of course, but you're doing fairly nicely. So you're moving along briskly. So 200 watts is the normal power rating, 250 if it's got a mechanism to cut out the power if you go above 25 kilometres an hour, which you can certainly do going downhill on a normal bicycle. You'll exceed 30, 40, 50, even above 60 if you're particularly good. The Tour de France people, they seem to be going on the flats about 60 kilometres an hour and sometimes even 70, and I can only do that going down very steep hills. But so they can certainly get to that. So an e-bike is limited by those two power ratings that I've just mentioned, one or the other. The rider needs to pedal the bike above 6 kilometres per hour. So 6 kilometres an hour is very slow. That's walking pace. But to get it above that, the motor can't do it. You can't just twist a throttle like a motorbike. You have to pedal this thing, but you'll be pedal assisted, and that's what the electric motor does. So e-bikes is essentially assisting you to pedal a normal bicycle. It is not like a motorbike where you hop on, open the throttle and away it goes. So understand it is still a bicycle. And because of that, you're not required to register this device. You're not required to have any license to operate it. And you can ride it on public roads and public pathways and public areas. So that's an e-bike. And so they're very similar. And in fact, essentially the same rules as a normal bicycle. As long as they fit in with that category, there is no additional requirement to a normal bicycle. But as soon as you go to e-scooter, there's a whole host of requirements and restrictions on them. So isn't that interesting? So let's have a look. But before I do, a warning, your e-bike could be a motorbike or a motorcycle. So if it has a petrol motor, it is a motorcycle. It is classed as a motorcycle. If the power exceeds those two ratings I gave you earlier, 200 if it just assists, or exceeds 250 with cutout above 6 kilometres per hour, or not capable of being propelled by pedalling without the motor operating. In other words, you have to pedal this thing to keep it to be a bicycle. So if you can't propel it by pedaling without the motor running, that it means it's really integral. It's a motorized device. And so if that e-bike is too powerful as above. It becomes a motorcycle, and you need a motorcycle license to operate it. You need a motorcycle helmet, not a bicycle helmet now. So you have to move from bicycle helmet to motorcycle helmet, and the bike has to be registered as a motorcycle. And of course, motorcycles cannot be ridden on footpaths or bicycle paths, etc. So just make sure your e-bike actually is an e-bike, and there's no other restrictions. It's treated as a bicycle. So this is the essence. So if you're under that power rating, and you're pedaling it like a bicycle, but you're power assisted, no additional requirements to ride it. So now let's look at e-scooters. So e-scooters are classified under the Victorian Road Traffic Act, and I believe similar in other states, as powered transporters. So they're treated as motor vehicles. There's an e-scooter trial in Victoria, I think New South Wales and a number of other states. And so only those in Victoria registered, so I think it's the brand name is Lime, excuse me, and the other one could be Neuron, so they're brand names. So these are shared or rented e-scooters. These are the only legal e-scooters that can be on public areas and bicycle paths and shared pathways. They're allowed to be used in Victoria, and in particular, they're only allowed currently during the trial, a one-year trial, started this year, will run through to the end of this year, or I think probably January next year. Melbourne CBD, Yarra City Council, Port Phillip City Council, and Ballarat. So they're the four trial locations in Victoria for these shared or rented Lime or Neuron scooters. So the only scooters you should legally see operating around Victoria in public areas are these shared bike, rented bikes, Lime or Neuron. Every other scooter you see out on footpaths, roadways, bike paths, etc., are all illegal or illegally operated. So this is a very strict and very different treatment of what you might have thought was a safer device. You would have thought, oh, it's closer to the ground. My feet are nearly on the ground here. You would think its power is no more excessive than we just explained with an e-bike. So it's weird that you can buy and sell e-scooters around Australia, but it's illegal to use them. So essentially, well, in public areas other than these shared bikes. So any private e-scooters are essentially illegal in any public area. So, and there's fines of about $1,000 that the police might impose, catching presumably young people as well as adults. So very strict controls on e-scooters.
Gary, I just wanted to mention also, Steve attended for me recently an event about the fire risks of electric vehicles. And
yes.
the fire authorities stated that they believe fires involving electric vehicles. So some of your businesses may actually have charging stations for electric vehicles. And the fire risk from the charging vehicles is very low. There's only been a couple of hundred fires worldwide to date. However, there is a much higher risk, I believe, maybe due to the variation in the bikes and scooters, that they apparently pose a much higher fire risk.
That's a very good point,
the lithium-ion batteries. So just wanted to mention that.
Thanks. So it's not just the batteries. I believe it's also the connections and the leads, and if they're in poor condition. So now think about it. Car ones are going to be thicker, protected leads, larger, better designed and manufactured plugs that plug in either at home or into the car. Whereas a lot of these things are made in various countries, and some of those countries that are manufacturing these have very low engineering and design standards. They're designed to be the cheapest way they can put these out because they're not controlled as motor vehicles are, including electric cars, which includes right through to lead and charging mechanisms and connectors. These can have flimsy little plug-ins. So any loose connector or damaged lead is also the fire risk as well as the lithium batteries, Andrea. So I think the little spark will set off the lithium battery, but the lithium batteries, when they start, are almost impossible to put the fire out. So very good point, Andrea, and thanks for that. So there you go, just a little tip. Most of these, unfortunately, e-scooters are illegal. So if you're thinking about it, get an e-bike. I think for many people, if you don't like pressing too hard and getting too sweaty, you can be out and about, breeze in your hair, and going places with e-bikes are a great way to do it. So there you go. So just pressing on with a few other changes. Andrea told us about the Victorian Dangerous Goods Reg changes. New South Wales, I won't go into great detail, but there is new demolition licensing regulations, and they come into force on the 1st of March next year with minor amendments. But there are some more significant amendments, and they've been put out to the 1st of March 2025 to give those in the demolition industry time to adapt and get the relevant licensing. So only minor amendments in New South Wales on demolition from March next year, and 2 years hence from that in March 2025 significant license changes. So all it means for you and I, we'll make sure if we've got demolition in any of our businesses in New South Wales, are they licensed? And we might need to check licensing requirements for demolition in other states as well. So they're the key things to check there. Also in New South Wales, they've introduced psychological hazard and psychological health regulations. We've reported earlier that Victoria, and I'll come to the Victorian ones again in a moment, already have these in place. So these will commence, so let's have a look. The psych regs have already commenced now from the 1st of October this month. So if you've got operations in New South Wales, new psychological health regulations now apply from the 1st of this month. They're a lot simpler than the Victorian psychological health regulations, and they rely primarily on the standard and existing risk management process, which essentially means you identify the psychological hazards and you control them. So the New South Wales regulations primarily concentrate on simply outlining the control measures that you need to put in place to consider things like the instruction and training for your team in relation to these hazards, and then work environment and work conditions, layout, work design, which could be demand for workflow, too much work, psychological hazard, too little or little control of people's work. So they've got to do work, but very little control of it, may be causing stress. So they're to be considered. So that's the New South Wales psychological health regs, primarily the standard risk management approach, and to have control measures in place. Interestingly, the Victorian regs require a documented control plan for psychological hazards. This is not specifically stated in New South Wales, although they do require that you have the control measures. So it may be appropriate and easiest to have a control plan in New South Wales as well. These legislative updates and more will be in our next legislative update service for those of our clients that subscribe to our quarterly legislative updates. These will be included in that. So just before we leave this, we have mentioned in last month the Victorian psychological health regulations. These have not commenced yet, as opposed to some other jurisdictions that I've just mentioned in New South Wales. They're likely to commence in early next year. I only presume that the current Vic government has become interested in the next month state election, as you would understand. That's not a criticism. So all the political parties have probably changed their focus for the time being to the elections, but we expect the commencement date to be set for probably Q1, quarter one next year, which include to identify those psychological hazards, put a documented control plan, and in Victoria, 6 monthly notification of reportable psychological complaints, which is only in 3 categories. So they haven't included all 5, but sexual harassment complaints, the aggression and violence, and I've forgotten the third one right now, but if you need it, it's in our newsletter. And we're going to have a fact sheet out within the next week or two and provide you with a sample risk assessment format so you can easily do a psychological hazard risk assessment. So we'll give you a template for that coming up soon as well. So we'll have that out for you shortly. Just coming up to the second last point I'd like to raise as we come into the end of our webinar today. We've got a strategic safety planning workshop scheduled for the 10th of November. What I can share with you is most businesses do not have a strategic safety plan. What they have is a safety business plan, which is budgeted for next year. So you go to your boss every year, I want to do these things and here's your budget. And that's what you've got. You've got a safety business plan. What this workshop's about is opening your eyes to thinking, yeah, but where do we want to be in 5 years' time? Where do we want to be? What does this business want to look like? And how do they want to perform? And how do you want people to behave 10 years out from now? This is about, if you want to build a safety culture, for example, this for most businesses is a bigger, longer term program. And how do you build this? And what do you do? And how? So this is really an opportunity to step out of the day-to-day grind and spend a day with like-minded people from other businesses that are interested in saying, how do we actually lift ourselves and lift our performance? So if you're interested in that, go to our website or give us a call if you want to book a place on that one-day workshop. And just finally, it wasn't scheduled in today, but I just came across this yesterday and I thought it was rather interesting. An article from US highway safety experts saying that the autopilot driving systems, and we know this is largely in electric cars, are dangerous. And so what they've pointed out is that there's been an observed increase in particular type of accidents, and this is from lack of concentration rather than other aspects of driving. This is not about increasing alcohol or drug driving, not an increase necessarily in speed or reckless driving. This is about maintaining vigilance in motor cars. And so the image here, it just happens to be a Tesla, but please don't focus. It's not brand oriented. There's an increasing number of brands. For example, Chevy, Cadillacs have self-driving or auto, they might call it autopilot. They're not full automation driving. They're meant to be driver assist. But what the article showed is many are using it as if they were full automated driving. And you can peel bananas and read a book and watch a movie or do something else. And what the study found, which I thought was interesting, we want these driver assistance aids, but we need a balance between driver assistance and yet driver engagement is crucial in any system. No system yet that we can see happening in the foreseeable future will be as good as a human being, a vigilant human being in the car. So yes, we want these aids. We like them. I think they're terrific. Like adaptive cruise control, slowing down, auto stop, spotting cyclists and pedestrians are all terrific, but none of them are perfect yet. The number of cameras they got, the computer chips to analyze as quickly as we need to understand, are not strangely as good as a human. And some of us think we're pretty fallible, and we are. And so these systems are a great adjunct to a vigilant driver. So I just thought I'd share that with you. So with that, I'll hand back to Jessica. Thanks for the opportunity, Jessica.
Hey, thank you, Andrea and Gary, for that safety update. Thank you for everyone else for joining us today and your support. Please stay safe and keep your community safe as well. Kindly join us for our next webinar on Friday, the 11th of November, same time. And I was happy to share this space with you, and hopefully we can continue to do so in the future. Other than that, goodbye and have a good day.
Thanks very much, Jessica. Thanks, everyone. See you next time.